Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I hope you'll stay for both lectures, but I'm not doing them both tonight. It may feel like I'm doing them both tonight. This has been a very difficult time for the Jewish people. And there are a few reflections I want to make even before we start the service. One, I want to extend our hearts to, of course, all the people involved in the war. And I especially want to think of my friend Reut Neumann, who many of you have met. She's been here several times. You might remember the redhead was here on Rosh Hashanah with me. She's been a friend of Arthur's and mine for 20 years. Lost her home, unfortunately, in a different situation about 5 months ago. And then last week, a missile landed on her neighbor's apartment, which fell on her apartment. And she's been in and out with, of course, millions of other people of the shelters. I want us to extend our hearts to Chabad. If you're not aware of what's going on with Chabad and what Candace Owens, that creep, and Tucker Carlson, that person, Chabad, you'll learn more about it as we go through this for the next two Shabbats. Chabad Lubavitch, the Chabad houses, the very, very famous, they are there for everybody. And I understand they are very Orthodox. We are not very Orthodox. But these are Jews I have never had a problem with in my entire life. I have known this group since I was a kid. All they ever did was give us candles and hospitality. When I came out of the closet, they were nice to me. The other Orthodox weren't as nice. Chabad is all over the world, in dangerous places and safe places, there for every Jew. And what is being done to them by Tucker Carlson with his slander, which you're going to hear about more next week, and what Candace Owens said about them being a Satanist, occultic practice, and the things that are being said to them, they were the ones holding the Bondi Beach event. It was their rabbi who was assassinated. It was their people and all kinds of people who were slaughtered. It's they who do the Jew, the menorah and the D. And they are but one representative example of what we are dealing with in this country and all around the world. And you're going to hear a much more worked up Jeff tonight than you have for a long time. And it's because, and I'll talk about this later too, it's because things are that bad. And we should be very worried. But I'm not going to destroy our entire Shabbat celebration, because as Jews, we should celebrate. There's one thing I want to say to get this Shabbat going. It's that the bywords of the Jewish people, the byword of the Jewish people, is what Tevye said. How do we toast an occasion? What do we say? What do we say? No, how do we say a toast? L'chaim, to life. The Jews celebrate life, and we are going to celebrate life even now. We are also going to continue to celebrate what we do for the whole world, because we have made those contributions. Sometimes they're very large, all the Nobel Prizes. Sometimes they're smaller, but very meaningful. And one of those occasions is this Sunday for our tzedakah. We could call it whatever you want to call it. I always call it Mitzvah Day. But you could call it a day of tzedakah, what have you. It is not too late to RSVP. If you haven't, as long as you're in this room, you can do it with Audrey. If you're online, send her an email, but fast. We're going to be meeting at noon. We'll have a little lunch and we'll hear some things, and then we'll do our sandwich making. The only bad part of this is it goes like that, because we get so many hands helping that the 1,000 sandwiches get made in about 1,000 seconds. And that's the only part that's not as fun, because I love being here and seeing all the generations together. So that is, and then and the Camp Casey list is in the newsletter, which is always available at www.chj-detroit.org. Our newsletter is always on there. Okay, without any further ado, we're going to start our service, and because I do have a long talk tonight. And if I don't get it through it all, I'll try to rush through some of it. This is the historical portion of our two-parter. And next week will be a lot more bringing it up to what's happening now, including some of the things that are happening as we speak. Our readers tonight are Rabbi Miriam Jairus, Miriam Leventhal, the plethora of Miriams tonight. Miriam, the great prophetess of Israel, Jerry Barkley, and Edie Mello, and, oh, sorry, that was under the rating here, Lonnie Fleischer. And we will begin by inviting, just in just a moment, don't get up quite yet, we'll do the reading. Arthur, if you will. Oh, he's already done it. And then we will invite Natan and Beth to light our candles. And as these Shabbat candles that we are about to light do give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who bring light.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor, Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom. Oh, no voice. Excuse me. Our ancestors. Am I good? Thank you. Our ancestors hallowed the Sabbath day. In dark times, it was a refuge for them, and in times of prosperity, it gave them rest and joy. As a community, we celebrate the opportunity to gather in that spirit, even as we imagine Shabbat anew. May we too find rest from the day's work and refuge from our cares. May we too feel the warmth of love and companionship. May we too feel our joys heightened and our sorrows softened by the love we give and receive. May we be blessed with Shabbat joy. May we be blessed with Shabbat peace. May we be blessed with Shabbat light.
Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShalom, Shomerei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Ro'avei HaShalom, Shalom Aleichem. Boachem b'shalom, Ohavei HaShalom, Setchem l'shalom. Miyom le'amim abayim, Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShalom, Shomerei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Rodafei HaShalom, Shalom Aleichem.
And I'm back. That was good, Lonnie. To cross the threshold of this room on Shabbat is to enter a place free from the demands of our everyday lives. We step away from our daily routines in an attempt to gain perspective on where we have been and where we are going. At other times, in other places, we feel fragile and alone. Yet here we join together to find strength, to build community as we look with wonder at the universe and seek our place within its vastness. To this place we come to lengthen our perspective.
To this place we come to question and explore.
In this place we awaken our imaginations.
In this place we draw strength as we allow ourselves to dream.
Together we share the challenge of an ever-changing world, a world often beyond our control. Together we seek to find meaning, calm our anxieties, understand our purpose. Together we share the burdens and blessings of responsibility. Together we bond as a community, a true gift of Shabbat.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, Shabbat nekabla. 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 Likrat Shabbat lichu v'nelcha, Ki et habracha hi mevia, Besimcha berena avotzola, B'nei Shabbat nekabla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabla.
Shabbat Shalom. The transforming power of love, the redeeming power of compassion, the healing power of forgiveness, these endure in every age. The joy which comes from sharing, the strength which comes from striving, the nourishment which comes from nature, these endure in every age. The celebration of life, the value of truth, the primacy of justice, these endure in every age. Amidst never-ending change, may we have the wisdom to know and to cherish those teachings which endure for all time.
Mi aish echafetz chaim, ohev yamim lirotov. Mi aish echafetz chaim, ohev yamim lirotov. Netzor leshon chamera, usvatecha midaber mirma. Sur merav asetov, bakeshich slom verot vehu. Netzor leshon chamera, usvatecha midaber mirma. Sur merav asetov, bakeshilom verot vehu. Mi aish echafetz chaim, ohev yamim lirotov.
Shabbat Shalom. Let us strive to lead loving, compassionate lives with our hearts, with our wisdom, and with our actions. Let these be the ideas that we inscribe in our innermost heart. May we practice them day and night, teaching them diligently to our children through our words and especially through our deeds, so that coming generations shall learn to revere and celebrate life.
Efori oribi, efo tikvati, tikvati bi, efo kochi, kochi bi, vegamba, vegamba, efo kochi, kochi bi, vegamba, vegambach. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you.
Don't merely expect to find or to believe that life is worthwhile. Make it worthwhile. Don't merely see life whole. Make it whole. Not knowing which should come first, to improve oneself or to improve the world, we end up doing neither. Actually, the only way to improve the world is by improving oneself, and the only way to improve oneself is by improving the world.
Niftach lanu sharet tzedchen v'chesed v'rachamim. Niftach lanu sharet tzedchen v'chesed v'rachamim. Ele sharim la shalom, niftach lanu v'navovam. Ele sharim la shalom, niftach lanu v'navovam. Niftach lanu sharet tzedchen v'chesed v'rachamim. Niftach lanu sharet tzedchen v'chesed v'rachamim.
In the pursuit of a just world, may we hold fast to the ideals that give life to its deepest meaning. Among these are the courage to hope even when hope is scarce, to dream of peace even when surrounded by uncertainty. Though the path to peace may be long, let us never lose sight of it. May we remember that peace is not only the absence of struggle, but the fullness of life that blossoms from justice, security, and compassion. Wherever there are struggles to achieve such a peace, let wisdom always guide actions. May we be vessels of peace, always carrying it in our hearts and minds, even when we seek to protect what we hold dear. And may the world we leave behind be one that reflects our highest ideals. freedom, understanding, and enduring harmony among all people.
Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, ve'akol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'akol, ve'akol ha'olam ve'imru shalom, shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, ve'akol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'akol, ve'akol ha'olam ve'imru shalom, shalom.
I'm trying to figure out where to put the birthday greetings in, and this seems like a good place. Anne-Marie left me a list, all framed up and everything. We want to wish happy birthday in March to Bruce Luria, Celeste Hasty, Henry Pinkney, Michael Whitty, Matthew Bustiker, Morton Schneider, Gerald Weinberg, Carolyn Lowe. I think I saw Carolyn come in. Here you are, hi. James Walker, Dr. Susan Shalom, Shirley Magder, Craig Ellison. I see him here somewhere. There he is. Hi, Craig. Happy birthday. And Robert Sandler. So happy birthday to all of you. And then we now switch to those who are maybe not doing so well. And those are the folks that we will recall now. As soon as I get my paper open, here we go. In this community, we find strength and common purpose. And so we always, at this time, turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support. Those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, and those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, we extend our well wishes to these wonderful members of our community, to Lee Bricker, Susan Lipson, and Jim Walker. May they and all that you may have in mind know a speedy recovery. And if there's someone you'd like to mention at this time, please do. Miriam? Anybody else? Good. It's good to know we have healthy friends and family for at least this week. May they know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, refuah shlema, renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits.
Makom ha'koach betochenu, mekorot ha'bracha mevrotenu. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Shalom. Makom ha'koach betochenu, mekorot ha'bracha mevrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Shalom.
Thank you. In memoriam, death cannot take that which is locked in our hearts. With our tears and our sorrow, we remember. With our courage and our strength, we do not forget. Acts of kindness, deeds of courage will remain. Beauty created, wisdom shared, is not lost. With our tears and our sorrow, we remember. With our tears in our sorrow, yes, we remember.
was meant to be a rub. But Our thoughts turn now to those who are no longer with us. Our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost. The martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. As we were off last week, we have a larger list, each of these beloved people remembered with love and fondness tonight. As we observe their yahrzeits: Samuel Bieber, Eitan Ben-Ami, Michael Berman, Rhea Lillian Blum, Mark Bonet, Joseph Brown, Elizabeth Freeman, William Ginsburg, Esther Jacobi, Miriam King, Barbara Kirby, Rebecca Kravitz, Joseph Krohn, Louis Levin, Edward Levy, Louis Linden, Greta Lipson, Max Luria, David Markowitz, Eli Master, David Mello, Sybil Offen, Pauline Robb, Marion Sandler, Herman H. Schneider, Ray I. Solomon, Gertrude Stewart, Reva Thatch, Arian Abraham Walker, Lena Weinstock, Lynn Williams, Wilfred Williams, and Abraham Young. If there's someone whose name you'd like to add to that list tonight, whom you're thinking about, now is the time. Jerry?
Dr. Mel Bartley.
Miriam?
My uncle Billy Matthews.
Anybody else?
Jerry Vidra.
We say, Yehi zichram livracha. May their memories provide blessing. We know that their lives did. May we preserve them all. If you can do so comfortably, please rise as together we recite our interpretation of the Mourner's Kaddish. Nit gadal v'nit kadash b'ruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each in our own way take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. One of the beloved names that we read this evening was David Markowitz. And I want to thank, there you are. I want to thank Sarah, who sponsored tonight's Oneg in his dear memory. Thank you. All right, well, yeah, that's fun, isn't it? I think I've taken on an impossible task because, I'm just going to throw this over there, because this was a 15-part course that I'm doing in 2 nights, and I'm not doing it well. But I'm going to do it the best I can. And I'm looking at Audrey because she asked for this in a class, and then it just sort of snowballed from there. I brought my computer here in case I need to look something up, but it's really not for tonight. Now, let me tell you about the limits of this review here. We're going to do this fast. We're going to take you on a whirlwind. And I am going to refer to things that are happening today because I can't help it, because it's on my mind and I can't get away from it. Our focus is on patterns, not episodes. But of course, I'm going to tell you the episodes, but just here and there, so you can understand how we got here. And we didn't get here yesterday. We didn't get here last year, yes, last month. You already knew that. But you probably may not have known that we didn't get here 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. We got here 2,300 years ago. That's when real Jew hatred began. So if there's only one thing, though, that I want you to take away from this, is the idea that Jew haters all look alike, and that all things that you've heard is Jew hatred encompass it all, because it's not. And I, who sit in this and stew in it all day and all night, because I am a member of the Jewish Professional Corps, and that's what we're doing these days, in between trying to celebrate and trying to mourn and trying to take care of our congregations and the needs of the Jewish community, we who have been involved in this have seen what those who excuse things as not being Jew hatred have manifested, and just in the few days. And you're going to understand better what I'm talking about in a moment. Jew hatred, as I talk about it, is a recurring social phenomenon that adapts to the context and the needs of those who require a scapegoat. And we have traditionally been that scapegoat. There is no question in my mind, after 45 years of intensely studying this, learning about it, reading endlessly about it, studying it with professors who know this history, waffling on whether or not something qualified as Jew hatred, only to discover that it did because it grew worse and more targeted, that I really feel now, after 45 years, that I can talk about it. But am I prepared for what happened? I'm not. I gave my first talk on this. I gave a class in 2019, but I gave my first talk on this from this bema, because I always tried to keep things as much as I could, a little bit positive or current events, which this is, of course. I can remember exactly when it was. It was February 2024, because my daughter and her then fiance were in town, and I presented screenful after screenful after screenful after screenful of the antizionism, which is a form of Jew hatred, as I will be emphasizing throughout these two lectures, to the point where after speaking for almost an hour, I had run out of time and I had half my slides left. And what I saw and presented that night was a drop in the bucket in severity to what's going on now. And the people who have been caught up in its vortex. The language of Jew hatred changes. The justification changes. The moral principles of those who express it understand that these people think they're right, and in most cases think they're moral, which you can imagine what that means about us. That vocabulary changes. But the underlying accusations, once they've blossomed, continue. Blood libels that you'll hear about tonight that began to emerge in medieval times have their own 21st century variety, not least of which is the accusations that Israel purposely committed a genocide that did not occur. Each era believes its version of Jew hatred is rational, justified, necessary. No era or approach believes that it's repeating the past. Oh no, we don't hate Jews. We hate this. We hate what they're doing. We hate how they act. And then others will say, well, of course we hate Jews. Look what they're doing. Look how they act. You'll get examples quickly. My approach to teaching this is always to describe how Jews are framed as the problem, no matter the historical situation. I will never pose questions, as some have done. What did the Jews do to deserve it? And I don't care if you hate Netanyahu. Netanyahu is not responsible for this. I have many reasons that I dislike him, none of which seem to match up with any American people that I've been talking to who have no idea what he actually is responsible for and not responsible for. But it doesn't matter. Jeffrey Epstein is not the cause of anti-Semitism. The guy who stole our money, who I've forgotten his name already, he wasn't responsible. What was that guy's name? The one who, thank you, Bernie Madoff. Rather, I frame things this way. What did Jew-hating groups in society need Jews to represent? So throughout the presentation, we're going to return to this language of Jew hatred. We're going to talk about the term itself. And I'm going to ask Arthur to change the slide. There's not going to be a ton of slides tonight. But I want you to understand the framework, the taxonomy, the categorization. Adam Lewis Klein, who was a great scholar, a young man who's been working on this, who's been looking at the patterns over 2,300 years, and understands that antisemitism is a word we're using wrong. First of all, an enemy of the Jews invented it. But it applied to a Jew hatred that was racialized, ethnicized, the Hitlerian type, the Ku Klux Klan type. But not exclusively, because they engage in other forms too. All of them do. Anti-Judaic. Anti-Judaic is the word I came up with because no one's had a good word for this yet. And notice how we use them just as one word, and if they're lowercase, they're lowercase. Because these people are not against Semites or Semitism. There is no such thing as a Semite or Semitism. Semitic is a language group, period. A language group. You'll learn next week. Actually, yeah, next week it's going to take where that word comes from. But it was invented by a German Jew hater because he didn't like the term Jew hatred. Antisemitismus instead. It sounded more scientific. Anti-Judaic, we will hear about shortly, based on Jewish religious beliefs, or, by the way, lack of Jewish beliefs, that we're all atheists. Anti-Zionism, based on accusing people, Jews, of stealing the land, of committing atrocities, of you name it. And then it grows from there. In the shortest amount of time I've ever had to do this in, and Arthur, you can go to the next slide, so it's just a background slide again. We're going to move from pagan antiquity to Christianity to medieval Europe with a stopover at medieval Islamic world and a conclusion, if I can get there, to this first part, inside Spain, which was a turning point in some ways. Along the way, please keep the question at the front of your minds. What kind of problem are Jews said to be in each era? Now, some people are always surprised to find out that Jew hatred began before Christianity. So much of it was perpetrated upon us by the Christians that we are, unless we've studied this, unaware of what happened in the pre-Christian Greco-Roman world. The phenomenon actually began in the 3rd century BCE and continued through the 1st century in those Hellenistic kingdoms that we learn about in school, the ones that were later followed by Roman imperial view. Christianity did not invent hostility to Jews because, in fact, there was already hostility to Jews. And, in fact, the first Christians were Jews. During antiquity, though, many Jews lived in Israel and Judea, but others were already a numerical minority in the diaspora. We were already out there. We had been in Babylon, Iraq, Persia for hundreds of years already from that first exile in 586 BCE. From the land of Israel, the land of Judea. But we had become, by this point, very visible in places like Alexandria, Egypt, which was a very important Hellenistic city. This is the era of Egypt that Cleopatra represents, okay, just to give you a pop culture kind of, well, it's also historical. Now, what were the things that bugged the people who hated us back then? Well, we had some distinctiveness that they would then turn into, well, let's just say it, slanders. Exclusive monotheism, that characterized us at a time when most people were polytheistic, which, of course, went with our rejection of the civic cults, which was their, it was their culture. They may not have actually believed in their gods anymore, but they believed in their culture and in their rituals and in what these gods stood for and so forth, and we wouldn't be part of that. And we were a little bit fussy, too. We didn't eat with them. We had dietary laws, you'll recall. And we didn't work the way they did. We took off the whole 7th day for rest. And we tended to in-marry. Or as one anti-Semite accused us of being today, we're inbred. This language is very strong. But on the other hand, we never chose to seek political domination of anything. We are not the imperialists. We were not then and we are not now. I know that people like to think that there are 500 million Jews in the world. There are 8.2 billion people on Earth. But lately I've been hearing there might be as many as 8.25 billion. So we are a rounding error. 15 million Jews is a rounding error. Let's keep that in mind too. We are among the most vulnerable people on this planet, and our enemies know that. In the Hellenistic city of Alexandria that I just mentioned, we find the first sustained site of documented Jew hatred. The city itself was founded in 331 BCE. It was cosmopolitan, Hellenistic. People from all over the world went there, and it had a large Jewish population. It was kind of a laboratory. You can think of it as ethnic pluralism within a kind of a hierarchy, a place that could create suspicions of groups that didn't assimilate into the larger culture. In 38 in 38 CE, we have documentation from a prominent Jewish thinker, Philo was his name, Philo of Alexandria, of an incident when the Jews refused to obey Caligula's decree that he be worshipped as a god. Mob hatred broke out. So that meant that Alexandria also became the site of the first pogrom. Again, in 66 CE, outbreaks of mob violence were directed at Jews. These were related to the war that was going on inside of Israel, Judea, because the Jews had revolted against Roman rule. And that battle led to persecution of Jews in Egypt, in Alexandria, in the Hellenistic world. Does any of this sound familiar? This should sound familiar. We have reports that in that particular pogrom, there were 50,000 Jewish deaths. We have texts. Hellenized Egyptian Alexandria, this is a great night for my voice to go, provides an origin story of this pre-Christian Jew hatred, I should say. Goes all the way back to before those riots. We have the writings of a 3rd century BCE priest, an Egyptian priest, a Hellenized Egyptian priest. This is not somebody doing Egyptian stuff, although it would have been an Egyptian type of Hellenistic worship. This man's name was Manetho. He devoted a large section of his main work, it was about the history of Egypt, he was writing, to the exodus of the Israelites. And at one point he turns to the story of the Exodus. And in the story of the Exodus, which we understand as, a reason for celebration, he explains that the Egyptians expelled the Jews because they were unclean. That the Jews had organized themselves around a priest, whose name he then later reveals to be Moses, and that the Egyptians were subject to a reign of terror imposed upon them by these Jews, with large-scale sacrilegious behavior, killing and roasting and eating the Egyptian gods, their animals, the sacred animals. And eventually the Pharaoh had no choice but to expel them, whereupon they founded their own rogue state, this is his language, in and around Jerusalem where they built their temple. So what do we already see here? The core accusations: Jews are impure. Jews are misanthropes. We hate outsiders. We hate humanity. We undermine the social order. We practice secret rituals. That's what Candace Owen tweeted about Chabad today. Israelis have been warned not to set foot in a Chabad or anything Jewish this week. And I can tell you Chabad is on high alert right now. They have been attacked 7 times in the last 15 years, including murderously attacked, as they were in Bondi Beach. That Jews are disloyal to the state, that they are dual loyalists, that they are capable of ritual crimes. You'll learn more about that too. These things should sound familiar because we're experiencing them right now. We have another source about Jew hatred coming from that ancient period. This came from Josephus. Now what Josephus did, Josephus is a famous Jewish historian, lived from about 37 to 100 CE. He, in his books, and he wrote a lot of them, among his books, wrote one called Against Apion. Apion was apparently a horrible, horrible person who hated Jews. But we don't have his texts. But we do have the things he said preserved by Josephus, who was writing a retort. He documented this in this book, this Against Apion, takes on Manetho. So that's how we know a lot about what this guy was saying, because Josephus quotes him. And he takes on this man Apion, whose origin we don't know a lot about. But he adds on to Manetho's claims about us. This Apion fellow who Josephus is addressing, says that not only did we do all these things and were we this horrible, but that we descended from a group of leprous Egyptian slaves. And that is the reason he says that we have Shabbat. Because this is a quote that Josephus brings from Apion. When the Jews had traveled a 6 days' journey, they had boils, bubos, in their groins. And then on the account of this, they arrested on the 7th day, as having gotten safely to that country which is now called Judea. They then preserved the language of the Egyptians and called that day the Sabbath. Even the word Shabbat doesn't belong to us according to them. But hey, we're going to meet people who don't believe we're actually Jews. Because how could we be the good guys in the Bible? We have to be the bad guys who killed all the Jews and took on the Jewish name, right? Yes, of course, right. And anyway, that's why Egyptians apparently called buboes on their groins sabbatosis. He goes on to quote things that they've said about Jews being misanthropes, that we worship the head of an ass, that we performed human sacrifices, that Jewish observance of strange dietary laws and circumcisions were established to be hostile to the Egyptians, and so on. Now, I got to go through my notes really quickly here because I got so much that I only took very, very little from that class. We have here the first real example of what became a growing tradition of Jew hatred. We have the exact writings of a Jew hatred, not quoted in a book of opposition, from a Roman elite perspective in the writings of a Roman senator and historian, very important man, you might have studied him, Tacitus. He lived from 56 to 120 CE. He was a Roman senator, a historian. He represented the educated classes, obviously. He was a senator. In his book called Histories, he describes the Jewish origins as being as diseased exiles, and Jewish practices framed as moral inversion, that everything we valued was meant as hatred towards the Romans. In other words, we worship one God to dishonor their gods. We don't work on the seventh day because we brought disease to them. We are immoral, they are always moral. This moral inversion is a big issue. The things that we do are always seen as immoral, even when they are the things that are done to us. 1,250 Israelis were slaughtered in the most merciless kind of way you can imagine. 250 were taken hostage. And who committed genocide that day? Well, on October 8th, they told us we were doing it. And on October 8th, even as they were saying this, the dead were still being gathered together. I can sum Tacitus's claims with one key quote, could have been said today. Among the Jews, all things are profane that we hold sacred, and on the other they regard as permissible what seems to us immoral. What we are seeing here is the birth of the libels directed at Jews as a collective threat, a dangerous people, and this is 2,300 years ago that this begins with this fellow Manetho. Moral inversion, conspiracy theories, collective guilt, internal loyalty framed as external hostility. We can't love our own people because that means we betray the country that hosts us. We can't be who we are because then we're not who they want us or demand that we be. These are both theological, anti-Judaism, I should have kept that up there, even go back, anti-Judaic, and they are racial and ethnic, anti-Semitic. They are all these things. But of course, what really kicks off the whole enterprise of Jew hatred is Christianity. That's the birth, the true birth of it. Now, what the Christians did ultimately was to reposition these old, now you can keep it up there, go ahead and keep it up there, was to reposition these old pagan accusations to suit their own needs, as we are seeing right now. This is what I mean whenever I say, and you will hear it again and again and again, that Jew hatred is a mutating virus. It will adapt its forms, its functions, to meet the needs of those who require a scapegoat. Like the moral hypocrisies of the Free Palestiners today, I'm not talking about people who care about Palestinians. I care about Palestinians. I care, for one, about the fact that they have been offered a state 7 times and not taken it, and I don't know why, except to punish the Jews. But when I talk about the Free Palestiners, I'm talking about a movement that today, its exact same cohort, the same people, are in the streets praising Ali Khamenei. They are mourning him tonight in New York. They are having vigils in the memory of one of the worst violators of human rights. Let me start that over. Of the single worst violator of human rights currently walking the planet until he wasn't last week. And he is their hero. and they are singing his praises because they love gay rights and women's rights. No, what they hate are the West. And who they see as representing the worst of the West is you and me, because we're Jews. This is a hypocrisy of the first degree. For Christians, Jew hatred would become the same, a ritual, sacralized. Now, it didn't happen at once. The first Christians, as I said, were Jews, Jesus, his disciples, all their earlier followers, and they had disputes. And those disputes are recorded in parts of the New Testament. But they are then subsequently elevated into being almost verbal war. And things that Jesus may or may not have said are elevated into absolute slander of us the later you get in the history of the writing of the New Testament. So arguments about what the rabbi said here and the rabbi said there, well, when they're translated, they're not rabbis anymore. When it's translated into English, they're now Pharisees, and Pharisees takes on that sinister kind of understanding. And you all know what I'm talking about because you've heard the word Pharisee used as a sinister way, right? Do you know who a Pharisee was? Hillel was a Pharisee. Shammai was a Pharisee. Akiva was a Pharisee. The names that you see of ancient rabbis all over Jewish buildings, those are Pharisees. If Jesus argued with these people and their schools of thought, he was doing it as a Jew. But his heirs, who were Gentile, were not. They were doing it as people who viewed the Jews as a problem. So, whatever Jesus' true story was, the Jesus movement, when it started, was nothing but another Jewish sect. You had the Pharisees, the rabbis, the Sadducees, the Essenes, the Zealots. Christianity doesn't begin to take on Jew-hating characteristics until it's no longer Jews anymore. Jesus dies in 30 CE. The temple is destroyed in 70 by Roman pagans. Christianity is a tiny minority for the next 150 years. We got no beef with them. They got no beef with us. But we begin to see it a little bit later as they do start to have beef with us. And we did too. We said bad things about them too. The difference is that the rabbis who criticized them didn't go on to publish it and become a major bestseller in the world. It was just a bunch of stuff they said. As Jewish rejection of Jesus as the Christ, by the way, it's not his last name. It's his title, the Christ, the Savior, the Christos, the Savior of the souls and of the world. As he was rejected in this role, the Gospels, particularly Matthew and John, but others too, begin to retell his story in a way that sets him violently, both verbally and in some cases realistically, as opposed to the Jews, okay? And we know how this ends because you all heard it at some point in your life. Jew, what comes after that? Jew, Christ, killer. You all know. You know how the sentence ends. For us, Christ might as well just be the first word of a phrase, killer. They were not written as blueprints for persecution. These were people who were trying to, win an argument. You come join us. Listen, we didn't join them, and that made them less legitimate. So they were upset. That's a legitimate argument, right? We didn't sign up. But once it's not Jews fighting Jews anymore about what God should look like, most of the original Jews' children the Jewish Christians' children became Jews again. They looked around. Jesus turned out not to be the Messiah because nothing changed, certainly nothing good. And they moved on with their lives, but the Gentiles got into it for reasons we could talk about another time, and I have. It's interesting. But now they begin to be bigger and greater, and Constantine takes over, right? And the church becomes the government's partner, really the government's ruler in many ways. And now its theological claims begin to acquire legal and social force. And the Jews, who were described critically as sort of debating partners that way in the Bible, are now seen as the enemies of Jesus. And the stories of his death become stories of how we pushed it and ultimately executed it. That we are no longer his people. They're a little parallel, too, to the Palestiners, the Free Palestiners. Did anybody notice how many times Jesus was referred to over the last 3 Christmases as a Palestinian? Oh, well, you're not paying attention, folks, and you need to be. Jesus as a Palestinian. Because if they say who Jesus really was, that he was a Jew, it gives legitimacy to the fact that the place that he lived in was called what? Judea, not Palestine. Do you know where the word Palestine comes from? You should know this. And you're going to get a lot of little digressions. When the Jews lost the war, the second one, to the Romans erased them. This was the Bar Kokhba revolt, not when the temple was destroyed, but about 80 years later. Natan taught a whole class on it, so some of you were asleep during it, or at least more, you were absent that day. And I know Natan taught this, so this is what, I know you always know, but this is what they did. When they made the place, to use the parlance of a later Jew hater, Adolf Hitler, when they made it Judenrein, free of Jews, Jewless, they changed the name of the country to Syria Palestina. Syria Palestina. What is Palestina from? From the Philistines, who in the Bible are the enemy of the Jews. They renamed their country, our country, not Judea, not Shomron, which is the translation, the Hebrew for Samaria, not Israel. Now it is Palestina. And there are no Jews. There are a handful of Jews. Some Jews did stay. But the majority of Jews now no longer live there as of 150 CE. And then the country didn't have our name anymore. And now, in 2023, 24, 25, the most famous Judean since King David isn't even a Judean anymore, not even a Jew anymore. He's a Palestinian. So by theologizing, sacralizing is the word, by sacralizing Jew hatred, they gave Christianity, and they gave Jew hatred through Christianity a kind of cosmic significance, an eternal justification, a moral certainty, and most importantly, a scapegoat for the killing of Jesus. Now understand that the Jesus story doesn't make sense if he doesn't die. How's he going to get resurrected if he didn't die? But don't try to argue about these things with anybody, because if there's a bad guy in the story, it's going to be us. And many, many stories will occur after this. Part of what happens is what we get is the doctrine of supersession. Christianity has come as the new Israel, grafted onto the tree. It's the language of the New Testament. And the old Israel, we're nothing. What happened? The old Israel, we're nothing. We are the people rejected by God. We betrayed our covenant with God. And therefore, Jewish suffering is mandated, interpreted as proof of God's divine rejection of the people who rejected him. We rejected God through Jesus, through our rejection of Jesus, and therefore, we must suffer. St. Augustine calls this the witness doctrine. He did say we were allowed to live, and that was the church's official policy. But that what we must live in is degradation to prove to people who reject the Christ that we deserve nothing. If you reject Jesus, they're saying to their followers, you'll be like the Jews. This approach continued all the way through the early church fathers. There was a fellow there in the 4th century who emphasized that the language of demonization and of hatred should continue. Christian emperors throughout all times will issue laws restricting Jews. Jews will be barred from offices. Synagogues will be subordinated. Social inferiority will be codified. And while at the early days at least, we don't have systemic violence or exterminationist kinds of violence, it's coming, and it came pretty quick. Now, this is based on Jewish religious beliefs. This is because I couldn't fit them all together, and I don't want you to think there was a hierarchy. It's not a hierarchy, it's just from oldest to newest. But the truth is that we could leave in those days. We could leave. You could stop being Jewish, and a lot of people stopped being Jewish. Some of them became very famous because they went on to persecute Jews. Now, if you haven't noticed that there are a lot of Jews today that have decided that they know what's the best thing, the rightest thing. As a Jew, I say, I cannot tell you how many as a Jews have thrown their ignorance in my face. Because I also hate to tell you that most of these as a Jews don't know a lot about being Jews. They never beat a Jew at all until the day that they decided that they were on the moral right side and there was nobody else who could possibly be right. And we're seeing it all over, and it's dangerous. Some people will call them capos. I will never do that. Capos were people who suffered in the camps. They were the ones who got the privileges for things that they had to do, horrible things. You never heard the word capo? Capo, right, capo. But I compare them to court Jews because there was a number of people who, to gain power, to gain social acceptance, to be better treated by their peers, who had, maybe they had common things with them, they had money or what have you, they became mouthpieces, both to help, they thought, the Jews, but also quite frequently to hurt them. In any case, the parallels with the pagan period are clear. Collective guilt, moral inversion, demonization, perpetual suspicion. And once this hatred is sanctified, violence no longer needs an excuse. And so as we enter medieval times, I cannot believe I'm doing it this fast, we're going to see how Jew hatred transforms into a social system and into ongoing mass violence on an on and off basis. So we're talking about roughly the period of the 10th to the 15th century. No one knows how to exactly define the medieval period, but that's my medieval period, maybe the 9th too. So roughly the 10th to 15th century. And a lot of it was based and grew out of external events, things that caused people to need a scapegoat. Early on, they're created because they have a social need. Now, there are other things that are occurring. First of all, medieval times, not as much fun as the name of the restaurant would indicate. It was pretty lousy. A lot of disease, a lot of death, a lot of religious wars, a lot of. And now we see myths and conspiracy theories, much like you are seeing tweeted today and every day. We see these beginning to advance. At the time, Christian Europe is a unified religious civilization. This is all before the Reformation. There's one pope, there's one church, there are various monarchies, but the church authority is deeply embedded in law, in culture, and in everyone's imagination, including the notion that Jews are to live, as I mentioned, a permanently subordinated minority. So this means that the legal social status of Jews was that where Jews would be tolerated, but they would be despised, they would be sometimes protected by rulers. Why? Why would the rulers protect them? Well, there was the idea of keeping them alive as an example that I spoke about, but also because they're useful. For instance, Christians are not allowed to lend money at interest. You cannot lend money if it's not at interest and have an economy. But Jews are. So what do we become? The money lenders. And that is not a good thing to be, and it will cause us much strife. We're isolated, socially and religiously, and we're always vulnerable. We never have power. So weirdly, we've got this paradox of being protected and expendable, necessary and hated, present but unwanted. We're also tiny. I don't think people truly understand the tininess of the Jewish world in the 10th century CE. There was not an enormous Jewish population. And in fact, the Jews had some hundreds of years earlier gone through what we call an evolutionary bottleneck. All Jews from Europe have a male ancestor, one of probably 7, 8 people, from Israel. And we all have a maternal ancestor who was part of a tiny cohort during the Roman era that converted to Judaism and joined the men because there were no women. And at some point they went through this bottleneck. That's what makes us different. It's why we look a little different than Jews from the Near East, the so-called Sephardic Jews, or we call Mizrahim. Now, later, soon, there would be greater numbers that they'd be moving eastward. And they moved eastward to Poland, Lithuania, Russia, etc., because of what happened where they started. They did not start there. We did not start there. Is Yiddish a Slavic language? What kind of language is Yiddish? German. Where do the Germans live? They don't live in Russia. They live in Central Europe, Western Europe. Why we got, as mostly Ashkenazic Jews in this room, to Eastern Europe was as a result of expulsions, pogroms, legal restrictions in places like Germany, all the Germanys, there were a lot of Germanys, so many Germanys, so many German duchies and kingdoms and this and that. But France, England, they were our good friends who tortured and abused us until they forced us to leave. As Western Europe increasingly offered Jews this instability and violence, some of which I'm going to talk about now, Eastern European rulers said, hey, come on over here. We got a big country. We're trying to get it settled. We need money. We need brains. And actually, I know you taught a course on this too, Natan. There was a bit of a golden age there for a little while, but we're not talking about that tonight. It didn't last long anyway. But we provided them with roles for commerce, administration, tax collection, etc. When we had those jobs, though, it was only because we couldn't have the other jobs. We couldn't own land. We couldn't do so many things that we wanted to do. And the Jews who were in Central Europe, and the recordings of these, the documentation is very, very, very heavy. We have a lot of it. The worst of the violence began in 1096 with the First Crusade. To this day, on Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av, the day of mourning in July or August, that mourns the destruction of both temples and includes mourning for all the horrible things that happened. The ones that I remember, the dirges that I remember the best, are not about the temples, but about what happened in the Crusades. It was horrifying. I studied it, and it was horrifying when we studied it. I remember students crying in class as they heard firsthand accounts of what happened to people there. And it was not, by the way, in kind, any different than what happened in the Holocaust or on October the 7th, 2023. Hyped up and violent, crusaders stopped in European towns to slaughter Jews. They saw it as a religious duty. These accounts, these accounts come from places like Speyer, Worms, where Rashi was, the famous Rashi, one of the most important medieval rabbis, Mainz, etc. They talked about Jews being slaughtered in a spirit of cruelty. Anybody seen any of the videos from October 7th? They don't release them widely, but they're starting to because they're getting permission from the families now to do it, because Israel wanted to protect their privacy and their pain. But some people have seen it, and when you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. And all of it was filmed gleefully by the perpetrators, except a few things caught on security cameras that popped on. One Jewish chronicle by a fellow named Solomon Bar Shimshon described crusaders avenging the blood of the hanged one. That meant Jesus, expressing the collective guilt of Jews. Okay, blood libel. You've heard a lot about blood libel. I believe what we are undergoing today is a very, very new kind of blood libel, but not so new too. The very first major case of it took place in a place that I have very much loved, but which is turning into very much a place of the 13th century. I'm sorry, the 12th century, because there in 1144, a little boy named William of Norwich disappeared. He just disappeared one day. He was found dead, and guess who was accused of his murder? The Jews. And guess what they were accused of doing to him when he was murdered? What do you think they were doing, these Jews supposedly doing? They were using his blood to make their... If you don't think this is alive and well today, I will show you a tweet about this from last week, and not from an obscure person. The charge had no evidence. It was prompted by this fellow named Thomas of Monmouth, who wrote a whole book about it. It became the first widely circulated blood libel, introducing this idea that the Jews killed Christian children for religious purposes, and it spread rapidly. It reappears wherever religious or social tensions arise. It has reappeared again. It is established as a myth. It doesn't require any kind of evidence whatsoever, and it stayed with them. Just a few years later, in 1190, a massacre of the Jews took place in York at Clifford's Tower. This was very much inspired by Thomas of Monmouth's book about now St. William. the little boy who was purportedly killed by Jews for his blood in the matzah. In point of fact, it was actually driven, when I talk about external events, here's one, by debt politics. The noblemen and townspeople were heavily indebted to Jewish moneylenders. Now, why were they indebted? Because they needed the money to pay the king, because the king was misusing their money. This had nothing to do with Jews. This is why they were in debt. And when the violence broke out, the debt registers, the books, were burned up, and it eliminated all of their financial obligations. All of this is so ludicrous, and all of this was so bloody, and all of this was so terrible. And ultimately, the Jews were expelled from France, from England, and ultimately, they just departed most of the places in Germany, and they went to the east. But I want to show you now the only audio-visual, well, it's not audio, it's just visual, illustrations of some other things that went on and some manifestations of this. So, Arthur, if you'll go to the first of these, we're going to go through these very quickly. All right, we're moving on. So, I talked about separation. You think those Stars of David, the yellow things, were the first thing? No. Hitler didn't make that up. This is an old tradition. Pointed hats the Jews had to wear to distinguish themselves from everybody else, because we didn't look differently enough, although they claimed that we looked different. Next one. These yellow circles, which gave Hitler the idea of the yellow star. You see them? Okay. And the pointed hats on the right. These are Jews wearing the yellow circles. The next one. Jesus nailed to the cross. But look who is ordering it. These guys here, the Jews with the pointed hats. They're ordering it. They are supervising it. They are making sure that Jesus is good and dead. This is church art from a reliquary casket in 1170. Next slide. Jesus is brought in this picture before Caiaphas. Now, can you guess which are the Jews? Now, Jesus is a Jew too, but he doesn't look like these Jews, does he? And this is from roughly the same era. The hats, the noses, the whole stereotype. Next slide. In the book of Psalms, there is a saying that says, that's our book, by the way, written in Hebrew. The fool says in his heart there is no God, but this is from a Christian version of the book of Psalms, illustrating the Christian Gentile disciplining the Jew because he won't believe in God, because he won't believe in Jesus, so he doesn't believe in God. He's an atheist. Jews are atheists. We don't believe in the right God. And you can see very much the same physiognomy there, the big nose, the whole thing. This did not start with Hitler. This is 1,000 years before Hitler. Next slide. Church art famously featured Rachel and Leah, the two sisters. Leah, as you may recall, was dim of eyes. She came to represent synagoga, the synagogue. Rachel was enlightened, the favored of Jacob. What is Jacob's name? Israel, right? And Israel is what they are now, not us anymore. And she looks down in shame on the right. She is dropping the Torah to the ground. And the glory is in ecclesia, Rachel, the church. Ecclesia is the church. These are not rare examples. You find these in churches throughout medieval Europe. The next picture, please. Here's another one on Notre Dame. Next one, please. Here is, you can see it here. Here, the synagogue is blindfolded. Sorry, it's a blurry picture. Blindfolded by a snake. The serpent of where? The garden. Next picture. Here's the blood libel. The murder of a different person, Simon of Trent. This is on the facade of Martin Luther's church in Wittenberg, Germany. Martin Luther was friendly to the Jews for about 10 minutes because he thought that the problem was Christianity and the Jews, they would be good, they would convert and all would be well, and some did. But ultimately, Jews weren't that interested in it, and so he became one of the great haters of the Jews, legendarily hating of the Jews. But here's just an example of them catching his blood so they can make their matzah or whatever it is they're doing. Next slide. Here we have the Judensau, the Jew sow. This is a folk image of Jews in an obscene contact with a large sow. The Jews are suckling at the pig's teats. You see that? Its popularity lasted for over 600 years. In Nazi Germany, classes of German school children were sent to see the Judensau that were on German churches everywhere. And the term remains extant. They still use it as a neo-Nazi insult. They want to call somebody something bad. They say, you're a Judensau. Next slide, please. Now, this is one of my favorite of blood libels. And this is your one laugh of the night. They believed and spread a libel that the Jews were stealing the wafers from the church. Now, the wafers are just cookies until a priest sanctifies them. And then they become the body of Christ. And what are these Jews doing to the body of Christ? Can you see? They're stabbing him and it's bleeding. And they believed this. And Jews died for this. Next slide. I think we're almost done. Here's more Jews slaughtering. Look at how they depict the Jews. This is from 1477 in Passau. And I think this might be the last one, aren't there? Once again, this is the synagoga and ecclesia. This is, this one I'm not going to go into. I meant to leave this out. All right, and then the next one, that's it. That's where we'll stop. How am I doing on time? I'm going to take 10 minutes, then we're going to be done. So all of this was theologically coherent to them. It all made sense. Now, I have to stop this because this is literally, I mean, I took 2 courses just on this. I want to talk about Jews under Islam. Now, things were better for the Jews under Islam, but let us not pretend that it was a glorious paradise for Jews under Islam. It was not. While most of our study has been on the Christian world, this idea that Christian bad, Muslim good is false. This was not the situation. At times, and there was a golden age when moderate Muslims ruled Spain, we had a golden age. But it was about 200 years, maybe a little less. It was a good time. But it wasn't the time of equality. From the minute that Islam rose in the Arabian Peninsula and spread through conquest throughout the entire Arab world, throughout North Africa and into Europe, as we are all well aware. What do they call that again when a country goes to war and brings its religion and takes over everybody? What's that word? What's that word? It starts with a C. Colonizing. Colonization. Interesting. Interesting. How much of the world speaks Arabic? How much of the world speaks Hebrew? I'll leave it there. The founder of Islam lived from 570 to 632. During his active years, he had early interactions with Jewish tribes that were living in Arabia, but they refused to accept Islam. And so, while at the beginning he had some good relations with them, things deteriorated. One such deterioration happened at a place called Khaybar. This was a Jewish oasis settlement north of Medina. You've heard of Mecca and Medina, this is Medina. Home to several Jewish tribes and fortresses, Jewish clans and fortresses. It was economically prosperous, agriculturally significant, and in 628, the Muslims launched an attack on them. It's called the Battle of Khaybar. Jewish tribes were defeated after siege warfare. Most were killed in fighting. Others were allowed to remain under Muslim control. The outcome was that while the Jews were not exterminated, they were subordinated. They were tenants on their own land. They had their property taken from them. They were forced to pay tribute. And from then on, Christians, who were very sparse in the Muslim world, and Jews, who were less sparse, paid a special tax called the jizya. And this tax was all the way into the 20th century. It was imposed on people called the jizya. It was on people called dhimmi, who were like a lesser group of monotheists, people of the book, but not the status. In any case, this wasn't an important battle, but in historical memory, Khaybar represents the glorious victory over the Jews and the establishment of Muslim dominance about them. And I will tell you that one of the things that you undoubtedly heard in the many, many, many protests that were happening in America, Europe, everywhere in the world against the Jews, against Israel, was this: Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yehud, Ja'ish Muhammad Sa Ya'ud. Khaybar, Khaybar, O Jews, the army of Muhammad will return. So tell me that they're just concerned with Netanyahu's policies. That is not what is going on here. I'm concerned with Netanyahu's policies. I can talk about Netanyahu's policies because I know what they are. But this war that was fought in Gaza was not a Netanyahu policy. It was a Netanyahu screw-up that we got into it in the first place. But every Israeli understood the need because they don't live tens of thousands of miles away. They live tens of minutes away from the people who want to exterminate them. There were so many other kinds of things that happened, and I'm going to have to, get through my pages real quick here. The bottom line, and I'll return to this next week, is that while most Jew haters, most Muslims are not Jew haters, although they've all become quite suspicious of us because of what's happening, but so have Americans. Jew hatred is on the rise like we've never seen it before in America. Never. And as you know, I'm a student of American Jewish history too, but it's on the rise like we've never seen it. And what has come with this is the fact that we realize, and if we haven't realized it yet, we should know this for already 100 years, right? That radical Islam is a problem. It's a problem for America, it's a problem for the West, and it's a big, big problem for the Jews. And it doesn't have to be all the Muslims, because there are how many Muslims in the world? How many? Not millions. 2 billion. What's 10% of 2 billion? Lowball estimates for radical Islam is 10%. That's 200 million. It's probably closer to 400 million. That's more people than live in this country. And on top of it, the suspicion and the fellow traveling of the Jew hatred that is spreading in many circles, Christian and Muslim and everybody else, is causing problems for us. Now, the hour is late, and I have other things to say about this, but next week I want you to know where we're going to go. We're going to talk just a little bit more about the Islamic issue. We're going to go to Spain. And the reason we're going to go to Spain is because, of course, you know about the expulsion and the horrors there. But Spain is where also Christians begin to talk in ethnicized and racialized ways about the Jews. It's the first time we hear that from them, that converts are not given a pass out of Jew hatred. They remain under suspicion. And we call those people the conversos, and we call them sometimes the moranos, but what they always were anusim, people forced to convert. Moranos means pig. Sorry, I went with the understanding of that, but I know not all of you know what that means. So, all right, so that's what we're going to do next week. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes on that, and then I'm going to talk about why I put anti-Zionism on this. But the preview of this I've given you already. You've heard what I've said. Because anti-Zionism is no longer the debate that Jews had in the 1920s and so forth about whether a Jewish state was a good idea or not. That's not what it is. It's about eliminating the Jewish state. It's about branding it apartheid. Who's been to Israel? Israel is not an apartheid state. Israel has a lot of goddamn problems, but apartheid is not one of them. There are more Muslims walking around, free people, right to vote, in Tel Aviv than there are Jews in every single, the total number of Jews, by a lot, by the way, greater by a factor of many than there are Jews living in any Arab country, any Muslim country, where we used to flourish. That's not apartheid. And when you start throwing these words around, genocide, apartheid, we become, once again, not just people who are in a dispute, but we are now people who are bloodthirsty. You want to talk about blood libel? Next week I'll tell you about the accusations that we are killing people for their organs. Next week I'll tell you about the secret tunnels that Chabad maintains, which we've reported by Candace Owens. How Chabad got us into the war with Iran. Did you know that? that nice, friendly Chabad rabbi. Hey, listen, I'm not a Chabadnik, but I think I said it at the beginning. These are nice people. They really are nice people. All they want to do is give Shabbat dinner to a couple of Jewish kids. That's what they're there for. Okay, this is a good time to stop. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm sorry I'm leaving you on a cliffhanger, but I did warn you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're going to end with Am Yisrael Chai. Where you been? Now, this is a Philo-Semite. Marranos. Jews sometimes called, and so does the Christians, sometimes called the new Christians pigs. Marranos. You couldn't easily convert out of it. Okay, we're going to sing. What happened? Well, you know, that doesn't matter. You know the song. There it is. Yes. Who doesn't know this song?
Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. 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 Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael 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 Chai. Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael 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 Chai.
I want to end with something. I am often asked why I am a rabbi if I don't believe in God. And I'm going to tell you what I say. I may not believe in God, but I believe in the Jewish people. Am Yisrael Chai. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.